Gentlemen, if I could ask you to take your seats, please. We're going to start now. We are joined on Zoom by another 20 or so participants. So welcome to everybody. Welcome to everybody here in person. It's great to have people, real people, to talk to instead of computers. Baruch Hashem, we have seen through a difficult period, and it's great to see you all here tonight. So welcome to this very, very special event. I'm sure I don't need to introduce myself. I think most of you know who I am. For those odd, very odd people who don't know who I am, my name is Jonathan Lieberman. And I, together with Rav Ido, started off this thing over here called Techelet. So I want to just tell you a little bit about Techelet. Techelet was actually born right here in this building. Techelet was born to two parents, very strange parents. One, young, highly intelligent, mature beyond his years, Israeli rabbi, and one not so young, not so intelligent, and immature beyond his years, refugee from the retarded city of Manchester. Now, despite the fact that we are made rather odd bedfellows, we found ourselves very quickly when Rav Ido came here just over 10 years ago now, a bit more, 10.5 years ago, yeah? 10 years ago. And I came here about 9 years ago. So when we found ourselves surprisingly on the same page. And that page was a page a little bit born of frustration, really. Frustration because we felt that there was something lacking. The so-called modern Orthodox, Dati-Leumi, religious Zionists, all these names, all these labels, didn't quite cut it. There was something missing. We both felt that we were looking for something different. We were looking for inspiration in the modern world, whilst remaining steadfast to the essence and to the halakha, but paying more than a nodding glance to the modern world. And we felt that this was something that was lacking. And so we decided that if it's not there, we have to create it. And to be honest, this child that was born called Techelet, it was a bit of a schizophrenic child, because it had two, well, I suppose it had two arms and two legs, but it had two arms to it because it had a Hebrew-speaking arm and an English-speaking arm. And Rav Ido's natural constituency, if you like, the people that he was trying to reach and is trying to reach and is reaching, was the Hebrew-speaking Israeli public, the largely uninitiated, who perhaps felt that Judaism had nothing really to offer them in the modern world. And this was just not the case. And Rav Ido's aim in this was to show the uninitiated that that is not the case. My constituency was slightly different. And that was that I was keen to show the already initiated that there was perhaps another way than the way that they were already involved in their Judaism. There was another, perhaps more inspiring way. And so together, but separately in a way, we developed this Techelet movement. It really, what we're trying to do is to create a movement here, which is to try to suffuse and to combine the modern world with authentic Judaism, and at the same time to make that inspiring. I just want to tell you a little bit about why we call it Techelet. Techelet, as you know, is the color turquoise or something like that, which is used in the making of tzitzit. The Torah tells us that we should have on our corners of our garments tzitzit, and there should be ptil techelet. There should be a thread of this color techelet. And that's how it always was until it wasn't, because the formula for the dye of techelet, which was made from a certain snail, was lost. And for approximately 1400 years, we did not know how to make techelet, how to make the dye techelet. And so, of course, if we didn't have the dye, we didn't have techelet and tzitzit. And that's why for 1400 years, people wore tzitzit, which were all white. There was no techelet on their tzitzit because we didn't know how to make it. But then came along the modern world, and through various scientific studies by very, very clever scientists who were traditional Jews. I don't know the full details. We actually had a lecture here a few years ago by somebody who was involved in the discovery or rediscovery of Techelet, and it was absolutely fascinating. I didn't understand most of it, it was beyond me, but it was still fascinating. But beyond, through modern science, we now know to the level of 98% certainty how to make Techelet again. And so now you will see many people, myself included, and Rav Ido included, who will wear Techelet in their tzitzit, because we now can. And I felt that if there was one mitzvah which symbolized what we were trying to do, which was to combine true authentic Judaism with the modern world, it was Techelet. Because without the modern world, without the scientific advances, without us embracing the modern science, we would never have got back to being able to fulfill a mitzvah that my father couldn't do, my grandfather, and none of my ancestors going back 1400 years. And I can, and I do, Baruch Hashem. So for me, the name Techelet symbolized that combination of the modern and the authentic Judaism that we are seeking. And I felt very inspired. I remember the first time that I wore tzitzit with Techelet, it was a real inspiration for me. Of course, Techelet is also the color blue. It represents the flag of our beloved country, of which we are very proud. So there's that connection as well. It's the color of the sea and the sky. It's the color which represents the everybody that goes to those shiurim and watches it on the recordings will see this backdrop, and they can't fail to recognize it. It's there in huge letters. We're trying to grow this organization. We want to try and bring together people of like mind, people to push the boundaries and to improve the way we view our Judaism and the way Judaism impinges on our life. Which brings me to tonight's event. because we have with us tonight as our guest, perhaps, for me anyway, one of the most important figures in 21st century, I can say now, but previously in 20th century Judaism, Rabbi Mathan Lopez Cardozo. For those of you who don't know him, I'm sure that many of you do, but for those of you who don't, Rabbi Cardozo was born in Holland, Amsterdam, just after the Second World War. He has strong Portuguese roots, so the Spanish and Portuguese amongst us can count him as one of your chevra. Rabbi Cardozo was educated in his Jewish education in the holy halls of Gateshead Yeshiva, and received his smicha from none other than the Gateshead Rosh Yeshiva, Rabbi Aryeh Gurewitz. So if that doesn't tell you, he knows his onions, okay? He also has a doctorate from Columbia Pacific University. And so I have a challenge for you all. At the end of the night, I would like you to come up with the collective term for a group of rabbi doctors. Okay? What is the collective noun for a group of rabbi doctors? We are absolutely delighted that Rabbi Cardozo has come here today to join us, because for us to have somebody of his stature and of his superb intellect and background both in secular studies and in Jewish studies, and most importantly, his thoughts and his writings on the modern world and Judaism is really exactly the page that we are on. So we are absolutely honored and delighted that Rabbi Cardozo has joined us tonight. I don't need to introduce Rav Ido to you. He is our superstar rabbi who, mark my words, he is going to go places, big places. Robert, the way we're going to do this evening, now that I've finished twittering on, is I'm going to hand over to Rav Ido, who is going to have a discussion with Rabbi Cardozo, and you are going to be party to that discussion. Flies on the wall, and then I hope there'll be some time afterwards for questions and answers.
Thank you very much, John, Rabbi Dr. John Lieberman. Thank you very much for your lecture. Introduction. We are good friends. Just want to share with you that to bring Rav Cardozo our shul. Last week I said to my wife that next Thursday I'm going to have a conversation with Rav Cardozo, special evening. And she asked me, where is it going to be? So I said, in our shul. She said, which shul? We live in Maskeret Batya. Which shul? I said, our shul in Natanya. And she laughed and said, you haven't left. So it was my dream to bring Rav Cardozo to this shul. I know Rav Cardozo more, I think, than 10 years. I translated his first article into Hebrew, and we published it in Makori Sham newspaper. And so I want to add to what Johnny said, and to add a few facts about Rav Cardozo. He will talk about himself, but he has a very special life story. So Rav Cardozo was born in 1946 in Amsterdam. His father was Jewish, but his mother, in her heart, she was Jewish, but formally, she was Christian. He converted when he was 16 years old. His mother, the formal conversion, 3-4 years later, something much more than that. Something that I remember from your story is that you got married, and 3 months later, your parents got married. No? A Jewish wedding. There you go. So he spent 12 years in Gateshead Yeshiva and got smicha there. He's the founder of David Cardozo Academy in Jerusalem. He published more than 13 books, maybe more. stopped counting. And Rav Cardozo brings a new, vital, fresh voice to the Orthodox world. His autobiography, entitled Lonely But Not Alone, is available on his website. Let's start, Rav Cardozo. I want to start with the first question. You called your life story Lonely But Not Alone. Why do you feel lonely? And why you're not alone?
Okay, that is indeed a very interesting question. But first of all, I want to thank you. I want to thank all the other organizers here, allowing me here to speak with my dear friend, Rav Ido, which also for me is a very big, very big honor. So thank you for that. Lonely but not alone, first of all, is a stolen title. And the stolen title, with permission of Queen of Holland, is that her grandmother, who is now great-grandmother of the king, wrote a book by that same title. Lonely but not alone. And I asked permission if I was allowed to use that title as well for this booklet. I'm now writing a very big book about the same topic, my autobiography, if that's the right word, or more spiritual about what happened to me overnight, let's say. But they won't go back, that's fine, you're allowed to do that. And so I am kosher as far as that title is concerned. Whether or not the rest is kosher, I don't know. And lonely but not alone, it says a lot about what I have been through. Not in the sense that it was all painful, but definitely that it was very different. As Rav Ido just said, my parents were mixed married. My father was a proud Portuguese Spanish Jew who was always a member of the Portuguese Spanish community in Amsterdam, the famous Snoka, for those who know that name, which means synagogue. A huge place, was once the largest synagogue in the world, or at least in Europe, 1,000 people, which was more or less completely wiped out in the Holocaust. Very few people are left there today, but there's still a minyan on Shabbat. My mother came from a Christian background. I did not know my grandparents on that side, and didn't want my father, or better their daughter, my mother, to marry a Jewish boy. It's not that the Jewish boy didn't want to marry, but it was the other way around. So my mother moved out of her parents' home, because she felt that she couldn't stay there any longer. And she moved into the Jewish community in Amsterdam. In Amsterdam, there was no ghetto, but was definitely a part which was very Jewish. And basically in the center of Amsterdam, where the synagogue stands. And there she met my father, a Jewish business. And they, as they say in English, they fell in love. My mother, or better, my father, didn't come at all from a religious Jewish background. Very proud about being Jewish, more in the social sense of the word than in the religious sense of the word. Not eat kosher, they even not at all observe Yom Kippur, but all their friends and everybody else were all Jewish. And she very quickly became part of that world to the extent that she felt Jewish. It spoke to her. But she never converted because my father didn't ask for it, and my mother at that time didn't see much reason to do that. Then, when I grew up and I was about 14 years old, my father happened to be a very big admirer of Spinoza, Jewish philosopher, no doubt one of the most important philosophers around, who turned his back on the Jewish tradition quite radically. And my father at him started to read him together with me when I was about 15 years old. It was not easy because Spinoza is a difficult reading. And there were some very sharp attacks on the Jewish tradition by Spinoza. He was the first secular Jew, or at least officially, who did not convert to Christianity. He just left religion altogether, became a very hard critic on the Jewish tradition and to a certain extent also on Christianity, but first of all on the Jewish tradition. And when I read about that, and my father told me about it, I asked him basically what was the response on the side of the Jewish community to Spinoza. This is 17th century Amsterdam. Spinoza also came from the Portuguese-Spanish background. His parents were born in Spain or in Portugal, and came to Amsterdam because Amsterdam at the time was the only city that allowed Jews to celebrate their religion without any objection against that. Well, obviously there was anti-Semitism there, but very small compared to anywhere else in the world. It was a very liberal place till this day, actually. It has its good sides and its bad sides. But good side was that the Jews could live there openly and observe their Jewishness, which was very often very difficult for them to do because all of our great-great-great-grandparents going back hundreds of years, 17th century and even 15th century, after the Inquisition in 1492, they were all raised as Catholics because that was the only way how they could survive. So when they suddenly heard that they were Jews, said we want to go back to the Jewish tradition, and they had no idea what they were speaking about. So when they came to Amsterdam, and there were a few rabbis there, including Spinoza's family, they suddenly had what we call today a rabbinic Judaism in front of them, which was very different from what they were reading in the Old Testament, because in the Old Testament there is no Torah Shabbat, there is no oral Torah. The way how we think about the Torah is very different from the church. And there were quite a few people there who didn't talk out like Spinoza did, but didn't really feel very much attracted to it either, because it was all very strange. I would say, I've said this once on a movie, that many of these people believe that the Jewish tradition is nothing more but Christianity without the cross. That's the way how it was seen. It is far from true, but that's the way how they saw it. So Spinoza was born into that kind of very mixed tradition and started first earlier to say things about the Jewish tradition when he got the most famous hero, the famous man ever written on a Jew by rabbis, and that is the Theorem on Spinoza, which till this day is a major debate about it, whether or not we should somehow do away with that ban. I have been involved in that for many years with professors and doctors and all sorts of different people. Long story. Anyway, I was brought up on the let's say, on the philosophy of Spinoza, but it made me too suddenly realize that perhaps there's also a side to the Jewish tradition which Spinoza didn't speak about. And I looked into that, and I spoke with professors and doctors and rabbis, and I realized that a lot of things what he had to say about the Jewish tradition was absolutely wrong. And I would even dare to say that he deliberately misconstrued Jewish tradition so that he would have a much better, let's say, way to get into the Christian world. It was extremely unfair on his side, and I've written in great lengths about this. And but since that day, Spinoza is part of my life. It's not that I'm a Spinozist, I am definitely not. And I object against his critique on the Jewish tradition. But he had a lot of other very important things to say, very big ideas about human psychology, about the subconscious, and many other things which are to this very day a matter of tremendous importance. And people sometimes accuse me, which is fine with me, that I'm a Spinozist. They don't know what the difference is between that and that. And I'm not a Spinozist when it comes to the Jewish tradition, because I completely disagree with him. But when it comes to all the other things which he wrote about, he wrote several books, he has much to say. And we cannot deny that. In fact, much of what he says is Jewish. And from where he got that, we don't know, because people always said he was burning to become a rabbi, which is absolutely not true, because he, in an early day, already had to leave the rabbinical school in Amsterdam to help his father out, whose business was falling apart. And he spent a few years as a businessman, and then he went into philosophy, but by that time he had already position altogether. Always is that a few years ago there was a very big, huge kind of conference on Spinoza, and the question was, should we annul and do away with the ban? And I was one of the speakers, together with famous professors from all over the world that have written many books about Spinoza. I was the only one who said, yes, we should annul. The others all said, no, no, no. And one of the reasons I have no doubt about that, and I also discussed that with them, is they wanted the Jewish tradition small-minded. So as long as it could continue to show that it was one of the most unique thinkers, which no doubt Spinoza was, to show that the whole Jewish tradition didn't want to have anything to do with him, put him in a ban, which is, by the way, very un-Jewish to do anything like that. That in itself made me to have a major clash with the professors, and it was very interesting. But then anyway, that is a side note. From there onwards, I went to a gymnasium, as it is called, a high school, where Latin and Greek and many other languages, and I was going to go and study in philosophy at the University of Amsterdam. But then I found tradition, and I found it extremely interesting. I said, you know what, let me first of all read a lot about it, and then afterwards I will perhaps go 1 year to Shiva to get a little bit more knowledge about all this. Now, to make a long story short, I stayed 12 years in yeshiva, and in the meantime did my doctorate as well, by the way, on Spinoza, but from a very different perspective than all the professors did. And we debates about it. Now,
but that was after you converted.
That was
After
after
the conversion. So I want to take you back to age 16 when you converted, and to ask you why, for God's sake, you did it yourself. Why to become a Jew?
Well, I found the Jewish tradition, and it is true till this very day, absolutely fascinating. Fascinating. Not so much what I learned in yeshiva, because that was very much only a part of the Jewish tradition and was in many ways also stagnant and very much not able to get out of the box, let's say, and think outside the box, but within the Jewish tradition. But when I started to basically read many other works of more modern philosophers, Jewish philosophers like Rav Dr. Berkowitz, and very famous people all, then I suddenly saw that the Jewish tradition is quite different from what I had learned in yeshiva. Not that I in any way want to ignore what I learned there, because I learned a lot of Talmud, helps me till this very, very much. But it was very typical when I came with a philosophical question to the Rosh Yeshivot and asked them about what Leibniz or Spinoza or anybody else had written about against or in favor of something. They had no clue what I was asking.
So on the one hand, you fell in love in Judaism. On the other hand, you had a strong critic on how they perform Judaism. So how do you explain it? Because people like me, for example, you chose Judaism. I didn't choose. I was born into it. So if you have so much critic on Judaism, so why did you choose it?
Because Judaism is Hebrew, is incredibly inspiring. And because that's also why I consider myself Orthodox. There would be a different kind of Orthodoxy. I felt that they were rewriting the Jewish tradition and the Orthodox Jewish tradition, which by now I knew that that is what happened. And therefore I said to myself, I want to learn the authentic Judaism. And that is what I did, and that is what it's about, to rediscover what it really says, and not what people have made of it and just wrote because people want them to say this sort of thing. That is also why I clash with a lot of also rabbis and people in the field, because they can't think outside the box. I am constantly thinking out of the box, and that is exactly what is so attractive. The beauty of the Jewish tradition is that it is not so much a belief as a religion like Christianity or even the Islam. The devil is Christianity. It's not so much a matter of you have to learn this is a dogma, and this you have to believe in. No, that never existed in the Jewish tradition. You can more or less think anything. If I say that I believe in God, that doesn't mean anything. Why not? Because I have no clue what I mean by the word God.
But Rambam gave us 13 principles of Judaism. What do you say? But it was accepted by all Jewish people.
It was accepted. It was a mistake.
It was a mistake.
And it was never meant by Maimonides. Because Maimonides wrote these 13 principles only for the time in which he lived, when the Jews were constantly confronted with questions by Christians, by the Islam, about the question, what is it that you believe? We know what we believe, but what are you believing? And the Jews basically said, we don't know. We don't know. You know why? Because that's not the most important thing to us. For us, the most important thing is the art of living. You live a proper life. And the halakha is the one which teaches us, if you understand the halakha well, how to do that. So if Maimonides would live today, I am absolutely convinced to tell us that we should stop saying or singing these certain principles, because he said, I only did that for the time being because these people needed that. By now we have outgrown this. And I can prove you, there's no time to do this now, that Maimonides himself didn't believe in all this.
I will be doing my article in Hebrew.
So dogmas never existed. Beliefs did exist, but they were always flexible. They were always open to discussion. The difference between Maimonides and the Kusari, Rav Yehuda Halevi are enormous. And the beauty, what I feel the beauty is, that you can think more or less whatever you want. There's only one thing which is central, and that is the halakha. The halakha is central in the sense that this is the way how you live. That is to say that there is a particular way how you live a Jewish life. Halakha means to walk through life. And if, as long as you do that, if you like Maimonides or you're anti-Maimonides, then we say, so what else?
Okay, I want to understand. If I believe in God that has a body, this is heretic or not? No, I'm asking you, according to your view on Judaism.
I don't know if there is a concept of heresy in the Jewish tradition. I believe that where you go wrong is when you walk away from the halakha, and where you say the halakha is meaningless and there's nothing to learn from, and there are better ways to live your life. Then I would say that's where the problem lies, not in the fact of whether I believe this or I believe that. There is no theology. in the
What is the
tradition.
problem with Avodah Zarah, idol worship?
There is no problem with Avodah Zarah, with idol worship, except for one thing. Idol worship was constantly busy telling people to do things the wrong way. By getting sexually involved in things which were abnormal, which were, absolutely unacceptable. And therefore the rabbis, especially Maimonides, was so much against Avodah Zarah, idol worship, not because the idol worship in itself, you want to worship an object or whatever it is, that's really what happened. I don't want to go into now, but that was not the problem. The problem was the ethics behind it, which was low, which was anti-moral, and that's the reason why there is so much objection against Avodah Zarah.
So if I understand you, so Judaism is based on morality at the end. So how you behave, what you do, how do you live your life. So if I bring the Rav, not Rav yet, but Mathan Cardozo, 16 years old, to Rav Cardozo, who's sitting here, and this teenager, Mathan Cardozo, is asking Rav Cardozo, tell me in one sentence, what is Judaism? I want to convert. Tell me, what is Judaism that I want to go into it? What would you say to me?
I would say today that for me is the most important, also at the time, most important push was to live in amazement. Constantly living in wonder. If you walk around in this world, everything is amazing. You can't take anything for granted. The whole meaning of religion is to object against taking the world for granted. And not only that you object against it, but then you have to ask, if it is the art of living an ethical life, then obviously the next question is, and that is based on amazement, then it's not just a matter of belief, but how do you translate that amazement into a particular way of living? I think that there lies the power. Therefore, for me, halacha is just as important as philosophy, because the halacha itself is a philosophy. It's a philosophy based on certain very unclear, let's say, definitions, which is fine with me. I love it because I can change my mind and I'm not out of the community at all, as long as I do the things which the halacha requires for me. I don't want to go into this yet, perhaps later on. What now needs to be changed in halacha because we're living in Israel and things like that. That is a story on itself.
Example, what is so amazing in halacha? Why halacha gives us the ability to be amazed?
I'll give you an example. A very simple example. If you take a piece of fruit and you want to put it into your mouth, an apple, and you for a moment think about the wonder of being able to eat an apple, right? Because not only that you like to eat it, it also goes well with the rest of your body. It does all sorts of miraculous things, which we cannot really explain. We can describe them, but we can't explain them, not even scientifically. Then what you need to do is to say, before you put the apple in your mouth, is one English word, wow. And now the question is, how do you translate wow in Hebrew? That is for me a typical PIS. What it is for me is it is a statement of amazement. And therefore I have to say it carefully because I have to show that I'm amazed by the fact that I can eat an apple. I think it is about everything and anything in the halacha, very complex situations, where the halacha says, wait a moment, don't do it just like that, without thinking about it, especially on Shabbat, when there are many things which are not allowed. Why are they not allowed? Because it stops you for a moment and it says to you, listen, what you are doing, you take for granted. But then you can't take it for granted at all because it's all miraculous. I don't know if you remember, but years ago, there was a very big halachic discussion with Rabbi Moshe Feinstein about whether or not you can open up a fridge on Shabbat. hot air would get in, and then it would start working again, and the motor would start working again. Are you allowed to do that? So today we more or less say that you are allowed to do that. Today in Israel we have special frigidairs for that. But I remember that I once had a discussion with a Reform rabbi about this. He says, "Are you crazy to make yourself a problem about opening and closing a frigidaire?" So I said, "Yes, exactly. That's the point. You just open it just like that. You don't even think about the miracle of a frigidaire. And what the bracha does, or the tefillah does, or the fact that Shabbat tells you can't just do it automatically. You think for a moment before you open the door, what am I actually doing? How is it possible that I can do that? The miracle that I can keep vegetables free, or vegetables, you say, fresh. These are all miracles. So instead of just going and doing it, you are told by the laws of Shabbat, don't do it just like that. Just think for a moment about it. And so there are thousands of examples where the halacha is actually a teaching way of living in amazement.
But it's more than that, because you call your book Jewish Law as rebellion, not as an amazement. Yeah.
The reason is very obvious, because I believe that rebellion is a word which expresses the fact that you don't take something for granted, and therefore you rebel against taking it for granted. The fact that you just say, this is all fine with me. No, the whole point of the Jewish tradition has always been from the days of Avraham Avinu. It was a rebellious religion or rebellious tradition, whatever name you want to call it, which went against what the rest of the world was saying, and therefore it was rebellious. And that is the beauty of it, because the Jews are rebellious, and that's what they need to be. The rest of the world just goes along with everything, and we say, wait a moment. Not so passionate, it's not so obvious that you can just like that take it for granted. There are all sorts of mysteries behind it, which not even science can explain. So be amazed, which really means to say that, like Avraham Avinu, the first Jew, was rebellious in the sense that he went against the stream of thinking where people took everything for granted and very often simplistic. And he said, there's nothing to be taken for granted. And at that moment, you will become a rebellion.
Against what I rebel when I eat kosher food, only kosher food?
Already one thing, going in great detail, but one thing is like this. You don't just put things in your mouth. Think about it. You make a bracha. Why this animal is kosher and this one is not kosher, that is a story on its own. But the very fact that we have laws concerning kashrut means to say that I am not taking it for granted, and I am not going along with the rest of the world that puts everything into its mouth, whatever it can get. And this is not a way of living a human life. This is like an animal. Why should we do that? The fact is that we have basically to say to ourselves, when I put something in my mouth, I need to know what it is, how was it killed, and also the other things, so that I am eating it with dignity, with dignity. Why one animal is kosher, why another one is not kosher, I've written about it. To go into this now. But that is the principle. So this all of Jewish tradition. It doesn't mean to say, by the way, that I agree with everything how the halacha was fixed in many years later. We'll come to that.
Yeah.
But that is the principle.
Before that, I want to ask you, it's absolutely the opposite from the way we were taught what is halacha, because today we are going to yeshivot and we go to rabbis and we are taught that we should be we should obey to whatever they say to us and whatever is written in our halachic books. So I don't find this rebellion in my Jewish life.
No, about your Jewish education. It should not be have been like it. It should have been that the teacher in front of the class would say, what is there rebellious about this halacha? And we don't teach that. My children, I have grandchildren, great-grandchildren, they come to me and they tell me also the halachot I've never heard of because I think that I made it up.
We never make up.
Never make anything up. And then I asked them, do you know why we don't do this? Why we do this? No idea. We know exactly what is permitted on Shabbat and what is not permitted on Shabbat. But the moment the question comes, what is the ideology behind it? Nobody knows. That's the wrong kind of Jewish education. And I know from my own children who went through that education, and I sometimes had real conflicts of opinion with their teachers. And I said to them, why don't you teach them what is the basis for the ideology behind it? And they didn't know. I'll tell you a story. When I just came on Aliyah, I get a phone call from a Rosh Yeshiva, a real Haredi background. It says, me and my friends, we would like to come and see you because we want to ask you some questions. So I said, fine. So they came once Friday morning. This is 34 years. And we sit down and there is their Strijmer, so it was that they had wisdom. And I said, what can I do for you? I said, well, we heard that you don't come from a religious background. And don't understand why you became religious. So I said, what? Do you not know why you are Jewish? And they were shocked by this, because that was all wasn't more than tradition, like, it was all taken for granted, and they couldn't believe that there was somebody there, and I'm not the only one, who said to himself, well, this is the right way of living. But it took me a long time to explain to them what this was all about. And I said, how can it be that you are Rosh Yeshiva? You know much more Talmud than I do. You don't know this. That I had also in Gates at Yeshiva. Gates at Yeshiva is a fantastic place, and I learned a lot there. But when it came to these questions, nobody knew anything, and I knew much more, including, don't misunderstand me, including that there were many people in the Hamhala, in the people who were running the yeshiva, who also didn't know. And when I came with my questions, they didn't know what to answer because they've never learned it.
Maybe they were afraid afraid of this way.
They were afraid of these questions. So let's keep it within this box and not move outside and not ask any unpleasant questions. And therefore, I think they missed out on a lot of Jewish stuff. There's a lot of Jewish stuff which relates to this. They never heard about this.
Let's move on and ask. So, do you think that every halacha should amaze us, or can amaze us, or there are something? Maybe there are a few halachot that we need to change in order they will fulfill this goal of amazement.
For that, especially now that we are living in Israel, the halakha was built for the last 2,000 years on our experience in Chutzlaretz, outside Israel, with the non-Jews around us, who we sometimes could use whenever we couldn't do something, like what we call Telescope, right? Which I think is a huge mistake to start. Also we do, but this is a mistake. We need to do it ourselves and find a new halachic way how we can do it ourselves. I'll give you one very extreme example. It's at the moment going on in Israeli society, and the question about can we build roads on Shabbat? Right? Because every time again there's the railroads or other roads, and it has to be built, we are being told, on Shabbat. Now let's assume that this is true. It's always very difficult to know because there's so many political issues involved. But I wrote an article in the Jerusalem Post, and I think you translated it in Hebrew. We in Jerusalem need to move forward, like every other state, and at the same time needs to be Jewish. If indeed it is true that we can't build these bridges and these railways on Shabbat, which means that we hold things back, which perhaps has all sorts of consequences we don't know, including that our roads are over full with cars and people get killed because of that, then we should do it on Shabbat, done specifically by Shomrei Shabbat, by people who are keeping Shabbat. Don't use the Jew who is not religious to do this. You do it yourself.
Wow.
You know how to do it, which is a long story in itself. And secondly, whenever you do it, make sure that you put out there a big sign which says, that when people drive by, they see it is not just what we are doing here. No, we have to keep Shabbat, but it says also, you have to live with that. And if we cannot move our, our state forward in the 21st century, then we are getting more and more behind. So there is an halachic way, in my opinion, and I don't think I'm the only one, where we can do it, but you have to teach people how to do that and how this can be done in a way which is halachically permissible. But that means that some of the rabbinical laws which we have will have to go.
It's an expansion of the idea of pikuach nefesh.
Absolutely.
Because pikuach nefesh in England or somewhere, it's not the same when we come to Israel, Eretz Israel, and we need to build a state. So today, pikuach nefesh is something else because we need to continue to live on Shabbat to run the country.
Let me give you an example of this. It's very good. It's brought by the Dor Revi'i of the Moshe school classmate, one of the great Gedolei Hador of the last generation, who was a Haredi, basically, but an open-minded Haredi. And he writes that the law, as you know, is that if your home burns down on Shabbat, you're not allowed to do anything. You're allowed to take a few things out, and for the rest you have to let it just go. What is the reason given? Because the non-Jews would otherwise say, if we just let it burn down, that their houses will also go in fire. So because it will be a danger to the Jewish community, we allow you to do it because it is pikuach nefesh. Because otherwise they will kill us, or whatever they can do to us. So he writes, wait a moment, that's not so clear at all, because what are we going to do in Tel Aviv, where everybody is Jewish? So there we should let the whole of Tel Aviv burn down on Shabbat, because there is no such argument that we can say it is non-Jews who will make us trouble. Yeah, true, it will make a very bad impression to the non-religious people, but they are still Jews by all means. So he says, pikuach nefesh doesn't mean that you only are allowed to do something when somebody literally dies. Pikuach nefesh also means when somebody gets into a situation where he can't live a normal life anymore. Somebody, his whole home burns down. He hasn't got a penny anymore. He can't look after his family anymore. That is called in his eyes, and I fully agree with that, that is a form of pikuach nefesh. Nobody is going to die, but these people will never live anymore a normal life, and they can't even look after their families anymore. So it says we must now introduce a new concept of pikuach nefesh, that we are in Tel Aviv allowed to start making sure that all these other houses don't burn down, right? And he uses all sorts of examples for that to basically say that is the new condition. And then we have to think about how are we halachically able to explain that. And in fact, not only explain it, but that we are mechuyaf, we are absolutely obligated to that. But the problem is that, and I don't want to say...
You expect that your rabbis in Gateshead will understand it?
No, because they're living in Gateshead.
Okay. No, this is the problem.
This is a huge problem.
You see, from here, from Eretz Israel, it's not.
It's a whole story. We have an army here. We have a Knesset. We have all sorts of things which we never had for the last 2,000 years. And then we are looking in books, which I greatly refer, like the Shulchan Aruch, which were written for the world of Jews living among non-Jews. So you can't use it anymore. You have to write or a new Shulchan Aruch, or at least you have constantly to update it.
So I just want to make it clear, you call to change few halachot, not because you disrespect halacha, but No, because you respect halacha and you want to fulfill the goals of halacha in our life and to be amazed by halacha, and that's why we need to keep halacha changing. And
did you read my book?
Another question, not about Shabbat, but about Yain Nesech. You have a special story with this issue of Yain Nesech. Can you tell us about it?
We all know what Yain Nesech is, yes? So I have a non-Jewish brother.
Maybe say a few words about what is Yain Nesech.
My brother, who feels very Jewish, but halachically never converted, one night, which I had forgotten, but he told me about a few years ago, he tells me that I once took a bottle of wine out of his hands, and I said to him, "Don't touch it, because then we can't drink it anymore." And he was very upset about this.
It was on Leila Seder, no? It was on
Leila
Seder.
He said, "I'm part of the Leila Seder. My grandparents also came out of Egypt. Also, I'm not halachically Jewish." But anyway, it upset him a lot. So then I started to think about it. And I believe, yes, that Yayin Nesech was meant at the time when there was Avodah Zarah, in the way as I explained before. And therefore, the question is, which the Meiri already has dealt with, is the question that the laws against non-Jews, do they still apply today? Because the non-Jews of a long time ago, in the days of the Talmud and before, were people who were involved in idol worship. A Christian today is not involved in idol worship.
Yeah.
And I know that there are Sephardi rabbis in the past, in Italy and so on, who would make kiddush. And I'm not saying we should do this, but who would make kiddush if there was no kosher wine? They make kiddush over non-kosher wine. Why? Because it was made by people who believed in one God. So they were not of the Avodah Zarah. So, and I'm pushing this because what I have seen around me all the time is that when a non-Jew comes on Shabbat to eat with you and he brings you a bottle of wine, right? And then you open it. And then that suddenly is clear that if he touches it, you can't drink it anymore. So what happens then is that people start schmoozing among each other, you know, because they don't want the non-Jew to hear this, yes? Which is incredibly embarrassing in every way. Yes? Now today we have Yayin Mevushalot, but I won't go into this now. But the very fact that it happens is, in my opinion, halachically absolutely not responsible and not in accordance to the ideology of the Jewish tradition. So I would do away with that law.
Wow. Okay, I want to move to the third part of our conversation and to talk about Jewish continuity. I think this is one of the issues that most worries the Jews around the world today. How do we keep our children in the way that they will continue our Masoret, tradition, heritage, and will not lost in the modern world? What do you think about the Jewish education today?
I find the Jewish education today that was in my days. When I was young, when I also went to some Jewish studies which were boring from beginning to end. There was a word for it, and very often upsetting. But I would say that there is no point, and I don't hope that please do not misunderstand me. There is no point in learning Mishnayot with children who are not coming from a religious background and don't know anything about you translate it into a deed, into an act. That's one thing. Secondly, today there are some books written. One of the best books is written by my dear friend, Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, who wrote a book called Radical Then, Radical Now. If you haven't read it, you must read it. I think it is also in Greek now. Yeah. And there he explains to his children who were just getting married what in his eyes is the Jewish tradition all about. He doesn't speak about halakha. Where he speaks about is about the ideology. What did Jews do for this world? How did we contribute to a better world? How do we still continue to want to do that? And so on. What are the big yesodot, the big foundations on which the Jewish tradition stands? He doesn't touch the question whether or not to open up the fridge on Shabbat, because he says that's not what we now need, and he's absolutely right about that. I spoke many times with him about it.
You agree with him or disagree? Because I know that you certain things you disagree.
I agree with him, but I also disagree because I say this with the greatest amount of respect, because he was a unique person, unbelievable genius. There were things where I felt that he had given in too much to the people who opposed him, which I wrote him, don't do that, stand for what you stand for, and don't give in. That he was pushed into that. It's a long story, but it was really a tragedy that happened. But, and to be quite honest, I've never said this before, but I will say this, and again, with the greatest amount of respect, the way how, for example, he has written these 5 books on the Chumash, right? They are a little too sweet.
Too sweet.
Again, what he does is, and it is genius the way how he does that, is to explain it without being a little critical about the Jewish tradition. He doesn't do that. And I'm sure, and I discussed that also with him, he said, because I'm writing basically for Jews who are not religious, or I'm writing for non-Jews. He wrote more for non-Jews than he wrote for Jews. That's really what it is. Nearly all his books are written for non-Jews. Mm-hmm. So that requires a different way of language, and he knew how to do that. And it's unbelievable. His English is fantastic. The way how he explains things is fantastic. I don't think we have anybody else coming close to him in that respect. But what I try to explain to him is you have to write more about the meaning of halakha, not just about some of the laws and so on, but showing what halakha is all about. So he said to me, Rabbi Soloveitchik has already done that in his book about Isha halakha, right? I said, yes, but I personally, again, with the greatest amount of respect, I have difficulties with that book, to be quite honest. And you could have written it for a way that for Jews and for non-Jews, they would say, wow, that's halakha. I never for one moment had thought about that. And to my great regret, he did not do that, because I think he was afraid of the Haredi community, that they would make him a lot of trouble, which I fully understand. The chief rabbi, I was once asked if I would perhaps take it over from him. And I said, absolutely not. You know why? Because you get also the people on top of you who will tell you what you're allowed to say and what you're not allowed to say. And I'm absolutely not part of that. And he agreed. But yeah, that's absolutely true. That is my biggest problem. My biggest headache is I can't even say what I want to say. Why? Because then this person criticized me for this and that person criticizing exactly for the opposite. And it became an impossible situation for me.
Maybe this is the difference between you, because you came all. Rav Soloveitchik was a student in Berlin, in university in Germany. So he combined in his life philosophy and Judaism, Rav Sachs as well, and you too. But the difference is that I don't know how to say it, but he has he's brave enough. You are brave enough. You see, you are brave enough to disagree or to go into.
Yes, but remember one thing, and that I'm saying in favor of Rav Sachs. I'm not the chief rabbi. The chief rabbi has all sorts of.
Maybe you should be.
I'm so wise not to accept it.
Who asked you? Oh, it's a scoop. Who asked you?
Not an official commission.
Where in England?
Yes.
Wow.
But I said, first of all, I'm not British, and his English, I can't compete with his English. And secondly, I felt that I couldn't say anymore what I had on my mind. And that is, for me, the most important thing. I was also asked to become the chief rabbi of Holland, which, by the way, is a very little job compared to the one in England.
Yeah.
But for the same reason, I told them under one condition: I'm not your spokesman. I'm only my own spokesman. That's what you have to live with. If you don't want to live with it, tell me now, because then there's no point in moving forward. And so they got scared and they said no. And
So let's go back to education. I think it will be the last question.
Yeah, okay. I want to say the following. The Jewish tradition has a mission. There's a matara, there is a mission, which is not just to educate Jews. It is a mission to educate the world. We are there to serve the rest of mankind. If we would just teach that in the classroom and say to all these children, yes, including my grandchildren, and say to them, listen here, remember one thing, we are not just there and it is only about the Jews. The Jews have to be an example, have to be an inspiration to the whole world. Whether we do that or not, that is a whole different question. But according to the Jewish tradition, that is our purpose. I can tell you from my own experience as a teacher, the moment you tell your young people, we have a mission in life, and it's not just looking after ourselves, but for the universal, let's say, of all of mankind, all of humankind, then already they say, oh, at the moment, I'm part of a mission? Sure. I never knew about that. I thought it was only about yes or not opening the fridge on Shabbat. I said, no, the truth about it is that there is a tremendous mission which we have. And it is not easy, and you have to pay a certain, there are certain things which you can't do because of that very reason. But at least you should know why you do them, because you do them, because there is a mission behind all this. And this is very much missing even today in Jewish education. I think that's the biggest problem. Don't start with learning Mishnah. Not that I'm against learning Mishnah. You can also learn it, but also read Rabbi Sachs's book, read Rabbi Kook's books, read about the books of Eliezer Berkowitz, and many more.
With Rav Cardozo's books.
If it helps, it helps. The main thing is that you have to walk away from the Jewish tradition by saying, wow, how is it possible that so much of all this is not even known to me? I'm not even aware of it. I'm going home and I make kiddush and I eat a little bit of not, and then I go to mincha and things like that. Yes, that is part of the Jewish tradition, but that is not the ultimate, let's say, view of what the Jewish tradition is all about. All about is, what do we do for mankind? They are not there for us, but we are there for them.
Reminds me that a book of Simon Sinek. You know him from the States? Simon Sinek start with the why question. Why do we do things? Why it is like that? And he talks about the financial world, about companies, but it's true when we come to Judaism. Start with why. Ask yourself why. It's not a heresy, but is something that you search for meaning in your life.
Right. And then you understand the halakha much better, and you're much more in love with the halakha. I'm in love with the halakha, exactly for that reason, because I know what is the background. And even when I may not agree, because Israel is different from Chutz La'aretz, but the fact is that that is the way how it is. And that is what we constantly have to emphasize with our children. And it is a little better now, I must say, certainly she won't where my grandchildren go. But the fact is that for most of the time, it is not happening. And what I would like to say, and that sounds a little contradictory, I am a little jealous of the Haredi community. And I'll tell you why. First of all, I was brought up in the Haredi community in Gateshead when I was in Gateshead. I never felt completely at home there, to be quite honest. Every time I wanted to go home and back to university, and then I said, oh no, let me learn an Ofsa Masechta. And that's the way I stayed there for so many years. But what it is that we have to realize that there is so much beauty there. There's so much powerful ideas there, which the Jewish community or the Jewish world has given to the non-Jewish world, that we are not even aware of it anymore, that we were the ones who brought this to the world, because the world has accepted it and nobody knows anymore that it actually came from the Jewish tradition. I'm not saying that everything comes from the Jewish tradition, but a lot of good things do come from the Jewish tradition. This is...
So I want to thank you, Rav Cardozo. Thank you very much for this talk. I want to thank Shoshana for arranging this evening and Johnny Lieberman. And now maybe we will open the conversations to questions. Yeah.
First of all, I find the meeting amazing. You speak about halakha, saying that the halakha in Israel should be different from the halakha usually because we're now living in our own time. What do you think about Jews who create free time today and speak about sacrifice and want to bring back the tradition?
I have no objection against that. I'm also still busy with the question, what are these sacrifices doing in the Chumash? Right? And there are a lot of opinions about that. And some of them are very interesting. And I also pray every morning, every afternoon, every evening. But sometimes I bring my own prayers in it as well, when I feel that some of the prayers don't live enough up to the new condition, and perhaps we should do something about it. But it should never get stagnant. It should never be a way that this is what it is, and there is no discussion anymore possible. There is always the possibility in the Jewish tradition about different views. We have always had them, but now we are living suddenly in a world which has a lot to do with the Holocaust, by the way, and that is that we have thrown all our weight behind the old-fashioned halakha. I don't like the word old-fashioned, but I just do it for a moment. Why? Because everything became halachic problem. And why is that? That is because the non-halachic problems, for example, what do we do with the Holocaust? Where was God in the Holocaust? Berkowitz wrote about it, right? Many people want to walk away from that because it shudders their faith, their beliefs, and they therefore don't want to hear it. So how do we replace it? We replace it by asking more halachic questions. But it won't work. Why not? Because the questions will come back one day, and we will have to deal with the Holocaust one way or the other. The time has not yet come, but it will come. And so it is true about a lot of other things. What I like about the Haredi community is its passion for those who are really Haredi. A lot of Haredi are not Haredi. But for those who are really honest Haredi, and they really fight for it, and they're prepared to make sacrifices for it and so forth, I have tremendous respect for that. Even so, I may not agree with their Weltanschauung, their outlook to life. But we should not look down on the Haredi community, or for that reason to the Dati, the Umi community, when we don't agree with that. They have their own ways, and there's a lot to learn from them. And I wouldn't like to see that the Haredi community would disappear in this country. I think it would be disastrous. But at the same time, there are things happening in that community which I obviously cannot agree with because they're wrong. And what that means is they're not Jewish. The fact that you walk around with a long black coat and with a stridel or with a shaitel doesn't mean automatically that you are religious. I'll tell you a little story. Many years ago, I'm sitting in an L plane. Behind me sit three Haredi fellows. I overhear them because they're sitting right behind me, how they are going to take telephones, diamonds, and also other things through the customs without having to pay for it. So I turn around and I say to them, Slicha, where in the Shulchan Aruch does it say that you're allowed to do this? And State of Israel, secular, and so on and so on. I said, Rabotai, I know the Shulchan Aruch. There's no way how you can do that. Anyway, I get to the customs, and the fellow stands behind the desk, says to me, "Can I open your suitcase?" So I said, "No, please. I don't have anything in there which I'm not allowed to bring in." So he opens it and he says, "Yeah, you don't have anything." So I said, you know why? Because I try to be religious. And if I try to be religious, the first thing is to be honest. And then he points out to the fellows who are standing over there, where the diamonds are coming out and the phones coming out. And he says, and what is about them? So I said to him, I said, I hope you understand this well. Don't misunderstand me. And that is this. They are not dati. They look dati, but they are not dati. Wow.
בבקשה.
I have a question. I perfectly understand why you believe in we have, tradition, Ashkenazi tradition, we have this tradition, this tradition. We all came to Israel. We all Jews. Why is this different? Why is, okay, if one Jew does something and it's permitted, why another Jew cannot do this? Because you came from different traditions. What does it mean tradition? What means tradition?
We believe in Judaism, but over the years, in the last 2,000 years, it has developed in different ways because of different circumstances. Sephardic circumstances are totally different from the Ashkenazi circumstances. So if one person will do it the Ashkenazi way and another person will do it the Sephardic way, and both of them have their reasons, their real reasons, their honest reasons, they, as far as I'm concerned, they can continue to do so. But what is happening already, and it will happen within also 15 years, is since the Sephardim and Ashkenazim are getting married together, this slowly will disappear. But it's not there yet. So, okay, as long as you are honest, you are authentic, you are really trying your utmost best to be religious, that's all what you need. People constantly ask me, every time again, when did you become religious? They asked that to me because of my background. So I said, I am not religious. The only thing what I can tell you is I'm trying very hard to be religious. I have not yet met any religious Jew in this world. Why? Because what is important is not that you are religious. What is important is the road, how to slowly move into the religious world. Whether or not I will ever make it, I don't know. But I do know one thing. I am trying as much as I can to be honest about it and to try to live up to it. That I sometimes fail, yes, I'm a human being. Asma, so what? That's not the end of the world. I don't think that the problem is the differences of opinion between Sephardim and Ashkenazi. Halavai, that is our problem. Our problem is honesty. Our problem is integrity. Our problem is authenticity. And to make sure that we do this in a way that we live up as far as human beings are able to live up to it. And to say, I do my utmost best under the circumstances. That's much more important. Kidneyot. There are rabbis who now today say that Ashkenazi rabbis who say that kidneyot are permitted. I eat kidneyot because I'm saying. I mean, I'm prepared for.
My wife is Tunisian, so you understand. More questions. Yeah.
Something earlier that really, you said, I worship, it's okay. It's the wrong thing was that they did it in a way that, but we're told we have one God. How can idol worship be okay?
Because people make mistakes. People are making very heavy mistakes.
Everything in our Torah is about going against idol worship.
Yeah, but the reason why that is because what idol worship has done to us as human beings, which is terrible.
Now,
what?
The world today still has its idols.
Absolutely, and I'm just as much against that as you are against it. No, I'm saying one thing. It is not a question about whether or not there is one God. There was only one God. If somebody believes in two gods, as we say in Yiddish, I'm definitely not saying it is okay. No, I'm just saying the problem is Avodah Zarah is not Avodah Zarah itself, but the consequences of it. That makes all the difference.
Philip.
What's the opinion of the panel, the winning panel here? We have 3 rabbis who are opinion about the difference between Rabbanan and Midoraita, as for instance, in the Cherem de Rabbeinu Gershon and Chalitza. What is your opinion? Should the Cherem de Rabbeinu Gershon, for instance, be more pushed forward as opposed to Chalitza, which is right?
Well, first of all, the Chalitza, or better, the issue of what did you just say? If you know the history behind it, right? Rabbeinu Gershon did that because the Catholic Church had already forbidden their people to marry more than one woman. That is the original reason. So we have a law, it's a rabbinical law, it says whatever is forbidden to non-Jews, Jews are not allowed to do, because it's a chilul Hashem. It is a terrible chilul Hashem. So therefore he instituted that. The Sephardi world didn't have that. Today, by the way, they have. No Sephardi Jew can marry two women. It's also too expensive, but that's something else. But the fact is that we want to do that anymore. The Chalitza is a huge problem, right? And like the Mamzer problem, it's also a major problem. And the Akunan, yes, all of them can be solved, because if you look in the Talmud, you will see that there are all sorts of ways to do that nobody gets hurt. But the problem is that the rabbis, with all respect, have not always used these possibilities. I'm saying, why not use them, especially today? It's a long story, which you will find.
You want to read more about Mamzer and all this stuff, so you can read it in this book.
And how to solve these problems.
Yeah.
More quick, I'm very interested in your ideas as can be interpreted differently in Israel than in Israel. That is, in this society, I can see a big breakdown because of the immigrants we've had from Russia and from the immigration policy. The law of return is that one of your grandparents has to be Jewish. Come, welcome. We open arms. But you can't marry. You can find an army who will educate you to go to the doctor, sit down, shake our minute. But don't marry. It's a big problem. I think it's in this society. I can see it happening more. And I'd just be very interested to hear your opinion as someone who thinks it's been interpreted differently in Israel.
Yes, well, the answer was given a long time ago by Chacham Ben Uziel, who was the first Sephardi chief rabbi of Israel in the days of Rav Kook and in the days, I think, also of Rav Herzog, where he said anybody who comes from a Jewish background, which he calls in Hebrew is Israel, from the seed of Israel, because there's one side or a grandparent or whatever it is, we should do anything to convert them, even when they want to keep the laws. And that is the only, I also write about this in this book, is the only way how to deal with it. Otherwise, on the end, we will have two kinds of Jews who can't marry each other, which will be a disaster for the state. And the fact that if something is a disaster for the state, ultimately means that it is undermining us, and undermining the Jews is an anti-halachic undertaking, which we should stop under all circumstances. Rav Uziel is of the opinion, let them first convert, then try to get them closer. Don't wait till they first have learned everything, but afterwards to do that. And he has got all sorts of different ideas about it, how to do that. it was not accepted. One day it will be accepted. It's just a matter of time.
Thank you very much to everybody. I have a question which I'd like to ask Rav Cardozo. Those of you who are familiar with the way I think and the shiurim that I give and the philosophy that I espouse will have heard tonight a far more deep and erudite version, really, of everything that I believe. Because what Rav Cardozo has basically put forward has been everything that I have been espousing for the last 10 years. I mean, I have a problem which I'm still grappling with, which I want to ask Rav Cardozo to give me some guidance on this. And let's take the example, for example, of Yain Nesech, or even Stam Yeinam. Just to tell you the difference, Yain Nesech is sacramental wine that is used in the Avodah Zarah. Stam Yeinam just means non-Jewish wine. Wine's not sacramental, but it's been used or touched or made by non-Jews. Now, we're agreed that this halakha appears to need some change here. The question that I grappled with is, as it stands, the halakha is that we can't use it. Now, the fact that I don't agree with that, because I believe that the philosophy behind that halakha is no longer valid. The original reason for Stam Yeinam was that we should not interact with goyim. We shouldn't sit and drink wine with goyim because it will come to lead to intermarriage. But on the other hand, we can sit and drink whiskey with them, and yet I can't go to a supermarket in Chutz La'aretz and buy a vinaigrette for my salad, which has got some wine in it, because it's not kosher. It makes no sense. The whole thing makes no sense. So I want to know how I deal with that. So, in other words, what I want to say is, you know what? I'm not going to keep standing. I'm going to go and eat the vinaigrette if I want to, like the rabbi that made kiddush on the non-Jewish wine. But on the other hand, if I want to keep the authentic halakha that was original, then I shouldn't be drinking whiskey with goyim. Maybe that's the way forward. The question that I have is, how does an individual like you, like me, like any of us here who have, inverted commas, a problem with a halakha, how do we deal with that? Do we have the right? Do we have the obligation to do what we think? Or do we have the obligation to say, I think it's wrong, but until we have a Sanhedrin to change it, I have to stick with it and I have to do as I'm told? That's the dilemma that I have, that I'm interested to know your views.
Well, it indeed is a paradoxical situation. We don't want to break away from the official tradition. But don't forget, if you look through the history of halakha, which is a story on its own, which is extremely fascinating, you will see that we constantly change things because the people changed it and not the rabbis. And afterwards, the rabbis came and justified it. Tosafot in the Gemara is full of it. And that is because if they see at a certain moment that already most Jews are now doing this, then what they do, which is actually quite beautiful, is let's find a way how to justify it. So, but who started it? The Jew in the street, not the chief rabbi. Why? Because the chief rabbi can't do it because of his status and because of his situation. But there are hundreds, if not thousands of examples why what happened was that the people started it, and then afterwards it was changed in a later state to the point that today nobody speaks anymore about. Do you know that a mikvah in 100 or 200 years ago, a mikvah in which women immerse, was at the beginning absolutely forbidden to be born. They went into cold, ice cold mikvahot. Nobody came up with the idea that it was permitted to add warm water to it. Till the Tanya, the first Lubavitcher, ever came and wrote, you can do it, right? At that time, there was a discussion about it, and the whole Jewish world stood upside down. Now nobody speaks anymore about it. Why? Because it has been accepted. Take your matzah on Pesach, right? The handmade matzah was always what we had. Then suddenly somebody created the machine-made matzah. You have no idea what happened when somebody came with the machine-made matzah. The Jewish world stood on its head. Who dares to allow this? Ask today if there's anybody, there are a few people, but anybody makes a major issue anymore about it. No, Israel has accepted it, and that's what it is. So sometimes you have to do things even when they are unpleasant, and you stand up against a larger crowd. There's only one answer to that. That's at least my answer. Just continue. Just continue. Are you paying a price for it? Some people will hate you because of it. Okay, that's my issue.
Thank you very much, Rav Cardozo. I'm familiar with your ideas for, I think, 10 years, but it's a pleasure to hear it again and again and again. You give me power, you give me the strength to continue with Jewish life. Whoever wants to buy Rav Cardozo's book on Jewish law, it's here, you can buy it. What you heard here in the last 90 minutes, 1 hour and a half, you can read it in his book on Mamzer, on Agunot, on Yainesech, on everything. So the books are there. Thank you again, Rav Cardozo. Bezrat Hashem. We'll meet you again.
Rather encourage you all to say, if anybody wants to buy his books, you have to be able to speak Hebrew right now, at least read Hebrew. I have about 60,000 copies in the Mathan here. Anybody who wants to buy Rav Ido's book and work your way through the Hebrew, it's well worth it as well. So they're available from me at any time you want. So thank you all for coming. And I remind all our viewers that we have a special Shabbat on and on Shabbat day for our special Shabbat call. The flyers will be sent out. They will be sent out. Thank you very much, everybody, and thank you, Rav, for those.
This is your book between speech and silence. Yeah.